Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jessica Reed. I'm joined by Kara Horowitz, and we are the chairs of the UCLA Food Allergy Parent Committee. My family's food allergy journey started when, as a baby, my son Dylan started exhibiting confusing and extremely upsetting symptoms: full body hives, projectile vomiting, eczema. So not long before his first birthday, Dylan was diagnosed with severe allergies to nuts and eggs and more moderate allergies to a handful of other foods. When we received the diagnosis, at first I was relieved to at least know what was causing his discomfort and strange symptoms. And then reality sank in, and it hit very hard. I felt so sad that Dylan had to live with this unpredictable, life-threatening condition. I felt guilty because I thought I must have caused it. I felt overwhelmed by the label reading, the food prep, keeping track of our EpiPens. And mostly, I just felt really terrified. I was afraid for Dylan's physical safety everywhere we went. And I was, of course, worried about his emotional well-being. What was his life going to look like at all of its different stages? And I imagine this sounds familiar to some of you listening today. But now it's been 15 years since Dylan was diagnosed with food allergies, and he is weeks away from his 16th birthday. And these days I'm much more terrified about thinking of him behind the wheel of a car than thinking of him eating a cupcake that I didn't bake myself. And our food allergy experiences over the years have definitely included some tough moments. I've had to administer the EpiPen, call 911, ride the ambulance to the ER, but they've included happy moments as well. Dylan outgrew some of his allergies. He was treated for others, and today he eats pretty freely. And there are two things that have been critical to helping our family navigate the world of food allergies, and I am equally grateful to both. First, our doctors at UCLA, whom you will hear from soon. They are warm and caring to Dylan and to his parents. They answer our many, many questions. They advise us, and they really take a holistic approach to patient care, connecting with GI specialists, ENTs, dietitians, whenever needed. And they are dedicated to progressing food allergy research toward better treatments and a cure. Second, connecting with other folks in the food allergy community has been incredibly important to our family. There are so many non-medical issues related to food allergy that come up in everyday life: how to deal with schools, family members, birthday parties, play dates, sleepovers, having a picky eater, you name it. Being able to call a fellow food allergy parent to vent or bounce things off of really helped me keep some perspective and definitely helped me feel supported. And these were the impetus for forming the UCLA Food Allergy Parent Committee. We're a group of parents we're a group of parents working with UCLA doctors and staff who want to better the lives of families impacted by food allergies. Our committee has three main objectives. The first is to advocate for the food allergy community within UCLA and outside of it. The second is to raise funds for research, including clinical trials, and for the expansion of the UCLA food allergy program. The third, and the one dearest to my heart, is to foster personal connections. We are a support network. If your child is a patient in the UCLA food allergy program, our committee is here to connect with you. All of us food allergy parents and caregivers are part of the same village, and we're here to support each other. So again, welcome. Now I'd like to turn things over to Kara. Kara.
Thank you, Jessica. My name is Kara Horowitz, and I'm honored to be here today. I am both a food allergy patient and a food allergy parent. I have had an anaphylactic allergy to peanuts since I was a baby. When I was growing up and fewer people understood food allergies, I had several terrifying allergic reactions. As an adult, I was determined to avoid another scary incident. So I used to call restaurants and ask if they used peanuts in the kitchen. If they said yes, I didn't feel safe eating there. That was particularly challenging on work trips or when I was with a big group. I also avoided any food that might contain traces of peanuts or cross-contamination. I spent countless hours doing research and fearing that something would go wrong. When my middle son, Will, who's now 9, was little, he was diagnosed with a peanut and tree nut allergy. My concerns about and fear of food allergies grew exponentially. 6 years ago, we had the incredible good fortune to meet Dr. Katru at UCLA. She was starting to desensitize patients via oral immunotherapy, or teaching one's body to tolerate increasing amounts of the food to which they're allergic. While we're still allergic, Will and I are now each able to tolerate much more of the foods that were so dangerous for us. For me personally, for my whole life, a piece of peanut that resembled a grain of sand could cause a life-threatening response. And after having gone through the program, I can eat several peanuts without having a reaction. Our allergies are so much easier to manage than they used to be. And the treatment we receive from Dr. Katru has changed both of our lives every day. Now, let me share a few notes about the format of this webinar. It will cover food allergy information for families of children ages 0 to 5. We will focus on the origins of food allergies, prevention, and treatment in early life. We will have additional webinars in the next few months, which will address elementary school years, high school years, and young adults. Following brief presentations by our UCLA food allergy faculty, we will be answering questions that were submitted to you prior to today's session, and then we will get into some Q&A. The Q&A function in Zoom is on, so if you have additional questions, we will try to address them today, time permitting, or use them to inform our future programs. Jessica?
As part of today's webinar, we'll also hear about food allergy clinical care, and we'll hear about some very promising research at UCLA that makes me very hopeful for the futures of all of our food allergic children. Now I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful faculty, and I'll let Dr. Katru introduce herself. Dr. Katru.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much, Jessica and Cara. So my name is Rita Kachru, and I'm an associate professor and section chief for clinical immunology and allergy through the Department of Medicine, and a co-director of the food allergy program with Dr. Garcia-Lloret. So we're actually going to be focusing a little bit on prevention at the beginning of this talk. And as you can see at the bottom of this slide, we know that there is a genetic predisposition associated with the development of allergies, but we are learning more and more about environmental exposures and maternal factors that can alter not only the maternal gut microbiome, but it can also impact the offspring's microbiome, as well as their tendency to develop allergic disease. So there's an actual epigenetic change in their genetic code that makes them more prone to developing allergies. I'm going to focus on the prenatal environmental factors, and then I'll be handing it off to my colleagues to talk about postnatal factors. Next slide. So there's been several cohort studies that have actually found that pre-pregnancy obesity, as well as excessive weight gain during pregnancy, can actually alter the intrauterine environment, promoting elevated concentrations of pro-inflammatory cytokines or messenger cells, which can then influence the fetus to transition to a more allergic phenotype. So what does that mean in English? Well, it means that a mom being obese prior to pregnancy and gaining too much weight during pregnancy not only is going to affect her own intestinal microbiome, but it's also going to shift it into a more pro-inflammatory microbiome that's going to then promote the child potentially to develop food allergies. And in this study, they actually were looking specifically at maternal weight and childhood steroid use, so for asthma development, but it can be associated with asthma, allergies, and food allergies as well. Next slide. So we know that not only does a high fat intake diet potentially increase these pro-inflammatory cytokines in the gut microbiome, but we know that it can be associated with a decrease in fiber, high fiber diets, as well as vitamin D, which we'll talk about in a second. So what we have found is that a diet that's high in fiber can actually promote certain bacteria that will promote the production of small chain fatty acids, which actually have a function that's very protective for food allergies. One, it can improve the ability of mucus production and IgA production. IgA is an important immunoglobulin in mucosal immunity. It also promotes tissue repair. And these small chain fatty acids can potentially promote the production of T regulatory cells, which you hear a lot about in the food allergy world, to decrease this phenotype of inflammation more towards a regulatory immune system that promotes tolerance. It also potentially improves epithelial integrity and, again, decreases inflammatory cytokines. So a diet high in fiber is something we can do in pregnancy. So one of the questions is always, should we have a diet that's high in food allergic foods, or avoid food allergic foods that are highly allergic to prevent food allergies in the offspring? It turns out it's not so much what the mom is eating, and we're actually kind of promoting more eat a varied diet, eat it regularly, but it's more a diet that's high in fiber, which can actually improve these kind of immune tolerant cells. Next slide, please. We also find a diet high in vitamin D is important. So again, what can the mom do? Pre-pregnancy weight low, weight gain during pregnancy, try to keep in check with the doctor, a diet high in fiber, and then vitamin D. And so vitamin D has actually been known to induce immunotolerance. We've seen this in asthma, we've seen this in chronic urticaria, and we're seeing it in food allergy and allergic disease in general. And this study actually looked at maternal supplementation, that means during pregnancy, increasing their vitamin D. And they actually found that if there's a high enough dose of vitamin D, anywhere from 400 units to 4,400 units, especially in the second and third trimester, it will actually improve the immune function of the newborn and towards immune tolerance, and away from this kind of inflammatory immune system, which tends to promote food allergies. Next slide. We also find that maternal stress plays a role. And the issue with maternal stress is that it does develop inflammatory cytokines, including C-reactive protein and glucocorticoids, in that intrauterine environment that the baby is growing in. And so not only does it affect their own microbiome, but it actually affects the actual womb where the baby is residing, and increases inflammatory cytokines like glucocorticoids, C-reactive protein, which then can again be a signal to promote inflammation in the baby as well. Again, an epigenetic transformation more to an allergic phenotype. New slide. Okay, we also find that air pollution plays a role, and we're finding it whether it's exposure in the first trimester, second trimester, or third trimester. And in this study, they actually found a significant odds ratio. An odds ratio greater of 1 shows that there is likelihood and association that first trimester air pollution exposure increases the risk for eczema, second trimester increase the risk for asthma, and third trimester for allergic rhinitis. So we know that it can, again, affect the genetic code so that there's more of a promoting towards an inflammatory pathway for the fetus. Next slide. Okay, so antibiotics play a role as well. Again, we're dealing with the gut microbiome. And what we find is not only antibiotics at the time of delivery. So often we'll ask moms who bring in their children with food allergies, did you receive antibiotics at the time of delivery or during pregnancy? Because that can alter their gut microbiome. And again, that can alter the gut microbiome of the fetus as well. So intrapartum antibiotics during pregnancy can affect how the microbiome of the mom, which again will affect the fetus. Okay, as in that same venue, vaginal versus C-section also can play a role in whether a fetus will go on to develop an allergic phenotype. So vaginal delivery, as they're going through the vaginal canal, they're swallowing the bacteria, has actually been shown to be promoting a more regulatory or tolerant immune system. And not only the certain microbiomes that I've listed, like lactobacilli, but there's other bacteria that we're actually finding more and more about that are considered prebiotics, that are these small chain fatty acids that actually promote tolerance or immune tolerance. Whereas a C-section delivery, you're more likely to be exposed to Staph aureus, and Staph can actually act as a super antigen and be more, kind of promote more of an inflammatory pathway for the fetus. New paragraph, or new slide, sorry. So you can see that environment does play a big role. We have this genetic predisposition, but the environment that the baby is actually during pregnancy does potentially play a role in food allergy. And we're seeing more and more data supporting this. So the microbiome, the diversity of the microbiome, which is affected by whether or not we're using antibiotics during pregnancy, the amount of pollution exposure, the diet, whether it's high in fiber and high in vitamin D, all can play a role, as well as psychosocial stress, in then developing this intrauterine environment that can either be pro-inflammatory and more likely to trigger food allergies or other inflammatory diseases like autoimmune kind of precursors, versus more of a immunotolerant environment that will then enhance regulatory immunity. So the fetal-maternal environment is actually very important, and pregnancy actually is important. So it's not so much whether you ate the foods that you were allergic to or not, but it's more developing this beautiful environment that actually can promote gut diversity and a healthy microbiome for not only the mom, but also the fetus. I'm going to now hand over to Dr. Garcia-Lloret, who's going to be talking about now after the pregnancy and after the delivery, what we can do to help prevent food allergies as well.
Okay, so my name is Maria Inés Garcia-Lloret, long name. I go by Maria. I'm a professor of pediatrics and founder and a co-director with my partner in crime, Dr. Katru, of the UCLA Food Allergy Program. Next. My role here, or my job, was to describe everything that happens in the first 5. And I totally like this idea of the first 5, because I think 80% of what we will be is set by age somewhere between 4 and 2 months. So this is the time where the child or the baby that you bring home is at the highest chance of adapting his immune system and his neurological system. Niclic. I'm always fascinated by the fact that when, especially with your first child, you deliver the baby, and then they give you this thing that you put in your car, and they essentially, the doctors, wish you good luck. And you know that there are important things that you need to facilitate. There are the E's, the eat, the sleep, the sit. Then there is the A's, there's the grabs, there's the talks, there is the walks. All of these things are things that you can facilitate. And niclic will tell us the things that we need to prevent. We don't want infection. We don't want, you put childproof in your house. You don't want accidents. And now, let's say in the last 20 years or so, a new job that your mother didn't have, or grandmother, that was to prevent allergy. When did that become a thing? And I looked a little bit in the statistics, and if you look at accidents in the first couple of years of life, is about 8% of kids will have some cut or burn or something, but up to 10% will have a food allergy. So you realize how that has become an important part of a parent's life. Niclic, the biggest issue, and I'm guessing niclic, is that I only know in the area of food allergy, but in the area of childbearing in general, there is no single way. There is this way that some people do, there is that way that other people do, and then there is the other way. And I think that that is valid for areas that I'm not that familiar with, and leaves us parents a little bit confused, and us doctors also a little bit confused. I'm not going to talk about neurological development, but we're going to focus on the things that have started to pave the way in the area of food allergy. Next slide. Okay, so where we stand now. Let's overall, the latest statistics, the prevalence is conservative overall in the population, 6%. But as I mentioned, in the first 5, it's probably closer to 10. It is a very expensive, condition to bear, $24 billion. If anyone can imagine, well, that means altogether in one room. An important aspect is that it's not a single condition, is that 30% of kids will have more than one food allergy. So that's what makes the management so complicated. And I want to use that word, to a certain degree, when you're a new parent, terrifying. 40% will experience life-threatening reactions. And that is, life-threatening is in the eye of the beholder. For some of us, swelling is enough. For others, is the throat. So it is something that is kind of dangling above the kids and parents' families, that possibility. There is a lot of, ED visits every year. There is a lot of episodes of anaphylaxis every year. ED doctors have probably could tell us the story of the many young children that they receive, probably 3 or 4, even in a small ED setting every day. And the truth is that food allergy as a whole, with all the problems that we have on measuring what is a food allergy, is challenge proven, is a couple of hives, that's still an area of contention, has increased enormously in the last, I would say 20 years, starting from the mid-90s. Next slide. The question is why, Well, this particular slide, I first came or designed it in 2015, and the causes or the whys are still not fully clarified, but we have made quite a bit of strides in certain areas. The question is, is the use of antibiotics in early age favors the development of allergy? Yes, sure. Starting with intrapartum antibiotics. If you have there are studies that show you prevent group B streptococcus infection, what is a good thing, that used to, affect very seriously a number of infants. But maybe food allergy is the price, we pay for. The exposure in utero is what Dr. Katru, what Rita mentioned. There is a lot of that we are learning in that aspect. We have learned a little bit too on the genetic predisposition to atopy as a whole. That undoubtedly this is a condition that runs in families. We have learned a lot on the role of the composition of microflora as a driver of food allergy, and that's what what Manish will talk after me. We have learned a lot about what is called the theory of double exposure or non-oral exposure, based on the observation that kids with eczema have a much higher risk of developing a food allergy, and that the principle is that if you expose an infant through the skin and you avoid the oral ingestion of the same food, you're probably tilting towards allergy instead of tolerance. And we've learned a lot about the amount and timing of introduction of the food. That is critical from 2008. After 2008 and before 2008, it was this way and that way, it's exactly the opposite. But we were saying before is, 180 degrees of what we're seeing now. Next slide. I had this slide had two parts, but I totally love the cartoon that when people have a problem, bureaucrats tend to do what it says there. Let's make a committee to create a task force, to develop a team, to determine the best way. And doctors that have to deal with kids with food allergy and parents essentially, don't want this approach. The approach that is not, for some reason it disappeared from my slide, to gain knowledge is to do, interventions, what is called randomized clinical trials, do mechanistic studies, acquire data, or observational studies, what are not that easy to do, in the proper way, and require a lot of effort, a lot of time, and a lot of commitment. But that's the only way to gain new knowledge, other than, oh, I have a patient that had this and this. Okay, next slide. This is what we have learned. We have learned about food allergies in the last, maybe 6 or 7 years. What is important? That in rural communities, there is less allergy than in urban settings. That close to the equator, and that maybe have a role of vitamin D, there is less allergy than there is away from the equator. The Canadians are in bad luck. Critically, that infant feeding practices, early exposure to a variety of allergens or foods, so not only early but diverse, reduces the risk of food allergy compared to late exposure and restricted diet. And that's a 180 degrees, the before and the after that I told you in the last few years. Next slide. These are the two, in my opinion, studies that were game changers. One is what we call the LEAP study, 600 babies, 5 years. Imagine how many people had to work on to prove what is essentially a game changer for the food allergy community. What they showed that if you give babies 4 to 11 months, sufficient amount of peanut regularly throughout the week for 5 years, you decrease the risk of developing a peanut allergy by 85 to 90%. The second study that to me is critical in this aspect for our young kids is another study that used 156 babies that were followed for 5 years. And just, this is an observational study. It allowed families to tell how many foods in the first year of life they introduce according to their customs. And if you can see, I'm going to go very quickly, kids that were introduced in the first year of life to 6 items of more, and this being Europe, one of the items was cake, compared to those that were introduced to 0 to 3, and that's some of the conservatives in the breastfeeding exclusive until they're a year community. They showed clearly that increase in food diversity in the first year of life is inversely associated with the incidence of food allergy. Next slide. The first 5 is no different. And this is my last slide here. What do we need to do? We need to identify the risk factors for our babies, and eczema continues to be at the top of the list, and family history. The clinical history, no one has a food allergy if we can prove that he's truly allergic. There is the skin test and there is the blood test, both of which have their own problems. The main problem being that sometimes overcall the allergy, and there's the oral challenge that we all hate. But it's the only way, is the gold standard. What do we do to manage once you came on board? Avoidance in the first years of, of life, at least for the first 2, is critical. There's got to be family awareness, anaphylaxis precautions, learn how, and when to use your epinephrine auto-injector. Parents have to become, their advocates in raising school awareness and preparedness. And then this I added more recently. I think that even in the first, just after the first 2, there is the opportunity to do allergen immunotherapy. Next slide. This is the last. the good news in the first 5 is that some of our kids will outgrow these allergies. Who at this point, we don't know. Which, if you're a parent of a kid with a milk or an egg allergy that are by far the most common in the first year of life, 4 out of 5, they'll outgrow it by age 5. So there is hope that alone, if we did nothing, this is going to happen. Conversely, if you're the parent of a kid with a peanut allergy or a tree nut allergy, the odds are not in your favor. So only 1 out of 8, but not 0, and 1 out of 10 will outgrow a tree nut. What is critical, again, when they turn 5, a lot of things are set, including the ability of the immune system to turn on its own. And this is the end for me. And I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Butte, that is our chief, and that we convinced to go into the food allergy business when he joined us a few years back.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Rita. It's been great. And a special thanks to Jessica and Kara for hosting this event. We're all very excited to share what we've learned about food allergy over the last few years. And in particular, I was asked to talk about the microbiome. Now you've heard Dr. Katru and Dr. Garcia-Lloret talk about the microbiome. And to me, I think an important place to bring, the microbiome offers us an important place to bring together a lot of the impacts on lifestyle that affect the development of food allergy and make sense of them. How does it make sense that when you have pets at home, you have less food allergy? Like, where does the pet dog have to do with food allergy development in my kid? How does it make sense what diet I eat when I'm pregnant, as Rita showed you earlier? How does that affect the development of food allergy in my kid, a year later? These lifestyle factors are confusing. Many of them represent the lifestyle factors of living in a modern Western society. And there are lots of overlaps. Those of us who don't get hookworm infections in our first years of life and carry Helminth worm infections throughout our lives, like most of us did 200 years back, and many people in the world still do today. How does sanitation affect my development of food allergy? And how do you tie all of it together to make sense of these interventions, these lifestyle factors, and the development of allergy? One way to sort of put a lens on all of that, to capture all of that into one set of concepts that start to make sense and allow you to interpret what the data are showing us, is by looking at the microbiome. So the microbiome is the bacteria and yeast and molds and fungi that live within us. They live in our guts. They live in our skin, on our skin surface. We do not have sterile skin. Every inch of your skin is covered with millions of bacteria. We carry trillions of bacteria inside of our gut. Almost as many cells of bacterial cells live within me as my own cells that I use to carry these bacteria around. And if you start to think about how all these different influences affect the microbiome, it can start to make sense how these lifestyle factors and how these interventions that we are proposing to use in the future can actually make an impact on food allergy. What I'm going to show you is a lot of speculation based on research studies that have been done in mice and in humans to try to understand mechanisms around how these different molecules cause food allergy or allow food allergy to develop. We are a long way from having a deep understanding in this area. This is probably one of the hottest areas of research in immunology, is to try to understand how the bacteria within us affect our diseases. And we're lucky in food allergy to have a chance to really see that every day. Okay, so this figure comes from an article from Kathleen Nagler, who's one of the leaders in the field of food allergy and the microbiome. And I think it captures a bunch of the influences and brings them all together in this hexagon in the middle here. So antibiotics are at the top. Antibiotic exposure, as Dr. Katru showed a few minutes ago, turns out to be a very important risk factor for development of food allergy. Antibiotic exposure can be prenatal or perinatal, like, for example, women with group B strep and colonization are exposed to antibiotics. There's also antibiotics not prescribed to us or to our infant children, which is massive, but also the antibiotics that make their way into our foods. The agricultural business, agribusiness as it's called, is so interested in maintaining a high productivity of livestock and their production, that antibiotics are used routinely to keep these animals healthy from getting sick, despite living in crowded situations with basically a terrible life. They can keep from dying of infection by loading up their feed with antibiotics. Those antibiotics make their way into our foods. And we've now seen from a variety of studies over the last 5 to 10 years that early exposure, prenatal, perinatal, and exposure to antibiotics in foods can alter the microbiome, alter those bacteria that live within our guts. When we're talking about the first 5 years of life, we're talking about the development of those bacteria, starting from an empty blank slate in utero, all the way to filling up that gut microbiome with 30 trillion bacterial cells of the right kinds, so that there's a healthy immune system at the end, or not. The second area here talks about diet, and the influence of diet on the development of food allergy is, of course, in some ways obvious. Maria just mentioned to you, for example, that early introduction of foods turns out to be critical to ensuring tolerance to specific antigens in those foods. But even what kinds of foods we have eaten in a Western diet has dramatically influenced the development of food allergy in our society. In general, we would say that this idea that high-fat, low-fiber diets have been a major driver of food allergy. But why? What is it about fat and high-fat diets? What is it about fiber and low-fiber diets that drive food allergy? I'll share a little bit about that with you. But again, the key way of understanding those influences is in their effect on the microbiome. There are other lifestyle factors that we can point to easily in epidemiological studies from around the world. That, for example, moving from a rural lifestyle with farm animals and livestock and pets to an urban lifestyle without those things, and also with fewer siblings, this sort of modern Western lifestyle, dramatically decreases our exposure to flora, some of the bacteria and their products in early life, and again, affects then the development of our own microbiomes. Infections in the first few years of life change the way that our immune system responds to sensing those bacteria that live within us. When we don't get a lot of infections in the first few years of life, we end up changing that response, becoming more inflamed, and that inflammation then can be read out in the mal-interactions between the microbiome and our gut immune system, again, leading to food allergy. And the last sections here are really sort of amazing to me, that by getting rid of things like H. pylori and whipworm and pinworm, common infections that affect all humans before sanitation. Now we can see the impact of that is that it changes the microbial diversity or microbiome in the gut, and those things actually push now towards the development of food allergy. And I put last on here is C-section. Rita already mentioned that passing through the vaginal canal versus C-section dramatically changes that very first inoculum of bacteria to go from that blank slate of the gut to now filling it with some bacteria and starting the cascade of microbial development in the gut. If you don't get a vaginal delivery, then there is a between 1.5 and 2-fold increase in food allergy. And we think that's, again, interpretable by understanding the effect on the microbiome. Okay, so I don't have a ton of slides, but I wanted to make sure that people understand that when we talk about the microbes that live in the gut, mostly bacteria we talk about, but remember there is a whole world of yeast and fungi and viruses that live in our gut too, that we don't really even have an early purchase on. It's not the bacteria themselves. It's not an infection of those bacteria. It's actually what they're made of. Those bacteria themselves are made of things like DNA and sugars and fats. And they also make things. They are factories. Their cells take in forms of nutrition and process them, and then they spit out forms of molecules, metabolites that they may be called, or even you could call them waste products. These bacteria are taking sugars in and turning them into fatty acids, et cetera. That microbial factory that lives within our guts is converting all the foods you eat into molecules that your body needs for nutrition, for all the maintenance of growth and immune function. And some of those molecules we have names for. Rita showed earlier this family of molecules called short-chain fatty acids. And the exemplar at the top of the list of short-chain fatty acids is one called butyrate, a very important small molecule. But there are many others too. This short-chain fatty acid called propionic acid, acetate, indole. There's a number of other molecules too that have been identified. And these molecules are made by the bacteria. Again, they take in the foods you eat at the same time you're eating them. They process them and make little molecules as a result of their waste products. We use those molecules then to regulate our immunity. In particular, some of these molecules have been harnessed and studied in how they affect tolerance in the gut. Tolerance means that when you eat a food that is a foreign protein, a piece of chicken protein, a piece of fruit, those proteins are alien to your body, but you don't treat them like an attack on your body. You treat them as a food, as something to ignore, as an enemy, and just use it as a nutritional source. That process is called tolerance. And we understand now that the gut microbiome makes these molecules, and those molecules make us tolerant. And that if you eat foods, but you don't have these tolerizing molecules because your microbiome is screwed up from all the ways that I showed you on the last slide, then instead you end up with immune inflammation. And some of that inflammation, it hits many different cell types. Rita mentioned Tregs, these regulatory T cells, sort of the policeman T cells that slow down immune responses. And she mentioned IgA, another important antibody that's made in the gut. But there are many other molecules and cells that are involved in the immune response in the gut. And there are even non-immune responses. Some of these molecules are very important for keeping our gut wall itself healthy. And if the gut wall itself is less healthy and the barrier function is broken, then proteins and foods can pass through and enter the circulation without going through a digestion process. The mucus production that's in the gut that keeps everything slimy and allows the food to process through, that mucus production itself is regulated by some of these bacterial metabolites. Okay, so we're going to talk about treatments in the last slide here, and because I know a lot of the audience is going to be interested in how we can use this knowledge about microbiome to actually treat food allergies. And I think it's important to think about treatment not just as after food allergies have developed, but also before food allergies have developed. Can we come up with interventions that reduce the development of food allergy or that allow us to get through food allergy or even cure food allergy? And so I've just put a bunch of categories of treatments that are being developed now on the side here. Probiotics are bacteria themselves that live in the gut and that can foster a healthy immune response in the gut. There have been a number of early studies in cow's milk protein allergy that were very positive and suggested that by modifying the diet to include probiotics while giving cow's milk protein, you can actually mitigate some of the food allergy development. Subsequent studies have been mixed. And so we're still at an early stage and we're still facing a low quality evidence around this particular intervention. Prebiotics are not bacteria that themselves colonize the gut, but can foster the growth of a healthy microbiome. And we know that some prebiotics have had an effect on asthma and eczema, but the effects on food allergy are not yet well studied. The next is something called fecal microbiome transplant, or FMT. This is, in some people's world, a gross idea that you can take the bacteria that come out in the poop and use them, purify them, and give them as a treatment. The idea that if somebody's healthy's microbiome can be harnessed, and you just take that collection of bacteria and say, well, your bacteria are dysregulated, all those antibiotics and C-sections and things that you had. How about you just take these bacteria, colonize your gut with them, and let's see if we can fix your immune system. This is an incredibly interesting idea because as compared with things like treatments that we ponder on how to fix food allergy now, or biologics, or immune modulating medicines. This is a relatively safe intervention. You're taking something that lives in one person's gut and moving it to another. It's done typically by encapsulating it with a triple capsule somebody swallows. You never taste or smell or anything like that. And typically they're done from, of course, screened donors, people who don't have bacterial infections in their gut. There are multiple studies underway right now for food allergy for fecal microbiome transplants. And we're actually anticipating that this is going to be a big deal over the next few years to start learning about it. Now, remember though, in the end, it's maybe not the bacteria themselves that's as important. Maybe if we could just capture those metabolites that I showed you some of which on the previous slide, propionate, acetate, butyrate. If we could capture those metabolites and use them as treatment, then we don't even need the bacteria themselves. Maybe I can just take the butyrate, give it to you and say, forget your microbiome. Here's the butyrate that you weren't making yourself. Maybe that's enough of a treatment. And there are certainly some clinical trials underway right now for those interventions as well. Overall, I would say trying to capture all of these things in one or two breaths, I would say it's too early to say. And we are very hopeful that this is going to be a major change in the way we manage food allergy in the next 5 to 10 years. But at this point, today, it is too early to point to any one of these as likely to work or even will be the most successful. Thank you. Okay,
thank you, doctors, for your presentations. We are going to move on to our Q&A. We will be using your pre-submitted questions. We only have time for a few. Please keep in mind, the faculty cannot answer a specific patient's medical questions, but they can discuss more broad food allergy topics and discuss the direction of food allergy at UCLA. Okay, so first question, Dr. Katru. Are blood tests or skin tests more accurate for food allergy detection?
Great question. Actually, both of them are excellent tests when used properly. They're biomarkers to determine if there's any specific IgE to a food or environmental allergen. But it's important to remember they're biomarkers. So more important than the actual test is what the clinical history is that determined to do the test in the first place. So as Maria mentioned, number one, we have to actually diagnose food allergies. And sometimes you'll see if the tests are not used properly, there's overdiagnosis of being sensitive to the foods. And there's the caveat is that we want to quickly introduce foods in our children's diet so that we prevent food allergies. So it's really important to make sure that we fully understand that these are biomarkers and that they have to be used in reference to clinical history. And so often I will use both skin test and a blood test and direct when I use them based on what the clinical history is. If they have a history of anaphylaxis, perhaps I'll do a blood test first. And only if the blood test is very low, then consider doing a skin test to confirm. But if the blood test is very high, and I already have a clinical history of anaphylaxis, there's no reason to do a skin test, and there is a risk of potentially priming them with a skin test. So it's really important to know when you're using the test and to use it properly.
Thank you.
Dr. Katru, another question for you. Can you please share more information about oral immunotherapy or OIT and other new treatments to help patients tolerate allergens? And also, at what age could a patient begin OIT?
Sure. So we are actually offering both clinical OIT, Dr. Garcia-Lloret and myself, as well as OIT in clinical trials. So we're still studying it. Are there ways to improve how someone tolerates oral immunotherapy? Are there ways to decrease side effects associated with it, like EOE? And so we're currently studying those still. So we are still offering clinical trials in oral immunotherapy, where we're doing partnerships with other California institutions like Stanford and UCSD, and Dr. Garcia-Lloret is actually quite active in that. We're also doing clinical OIT, where we've taken the data that we've gotten from our clinical trials and we've translated it into our clinical program. So we can actually determine how quickly we move through the desensitization process on actual the patient. And so we don't have to be so rigid in how we do the program. So clinical OIT is an option. OIT through clinical trials is an option here at UCLA. We're also doing epicutaneous immunotherapy, which is where we introduce the foods via the skin. And that can be done even at a younger age. And the studies that we're doing here are actually in infants to see if we can potentially decrease their risk of developing a more severe food allergy. And there's also something called sublingual immunotherapy that we are actually considering starting here at UCLA. We have not started it as of yet, where we give small increasing doses under the tongue in smaller doses, almost homeopathic doses. And that might be a way to start it even at a younger age. To your point of what age do we start it? One of the issues with starting oral immunotherapy at below 4 or 5 years old is tolerance, is the ability for the child to actually tolerate it. The hardest part, believe it or not, is actually getting them to eat the food. And so that's very difficult to do at a younger age. Also, it's easier to look for side effects like eosinophilic esophagitis or reflux or development of other allergic diseases. And so most of the clinical trials for OIT have started at around age 4. But again, we do offer the clinical programs that we can, based on each patient, we could offer earlier as well. And then the sublingual immunotherapy we can do at a younger age. So there's lots of different options that we have both clinically as well as through research trials.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is for Dr. Garcia-Lloret. And this question looks at a scenario of a boy who's 3.5. He was allergic to sesame, but he seemed to outgrow the allergy by successfully passing a food challenge. But then he began reacting again to sesame, all within less than 2 years. Is this scenario common? Have you seen this happen with sesame or any other allergen, where a patient apparently outgrew the allergy and then started reacting again?
Well, we wish we had a marker for outgrowing, passing a challenge once and say, oh, we're good. We're good for that day. The way that we think, especially in a child that outgrew it on his own, or even the ones that went through oral immunotherapy or progressive ascending doses, is that it can come back. That is the key issue, is that what we know now, not only, if anything, with the peanut study, with the leap study, is not only giving the food, but keep on, and the length of the duration, more importantly, because we don't have a good biomarker of having it outgrown. We're working on it. What does it mean? We don't measure the regulatory T cells for sesame, and we don't even know where they live. So once you are lucky enough to outgrow your allergy, at least for the next 5 years, it should be incorporated regularly into the diet. We say a minimum of 2, twice a week. So this scenario does happen. And with sesame probably happens more because it's a tough food to introduce, regularly in the diet, unless you live in Israel where halva is a common thing. But here in the US, here is a problem because it's difficult to keep it in the diet. And a few sesame seeds won't do it.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Garcia-Lloret, how does anaphylaxis often present in infant and toddlers?
There is some good news. Usually, in the large studies where they looked at anaphylaxis and ED visits, infants as a whole, yes, they present perhaps on first, when we're talking a food allergy, on first exposure, because it's apparent exposure. The first time you gave your baby an egg, he got a reaction. But the reactions in infants tend to be milder, rarely involving respiratory issues, and they tend to throw up and get some hives. But when they look, and nobody likes this word, but morbidity, maybe it appears more, but in terms of mortality, it's almost there's no reports. All the badness in food allergy happens in 15 and above. The things that we fear the most. Of course, they're rare. You don't want to be the one, but infants tend to have, first of all, they limit themselves. They don't want to eat it. You should listen, put, you know, that face that they make. Second, the reactions are limited to the skin and the vomiting, what is also a good thing, because if you vomit the allergen, usually the anaphylaxis doesn't progress. It's scary because they're little, but it's definitely not, is milder, you know, and this is consensus from many, many studies.
Thank you. In the interest of time, that was our final question. So as we're nearing the end of our hour together, before we wrap up, I'd love to give each of our faculty leaders the opportunity to share any final remarks. Dr. Garcia-Lloret, would you like to go first?
Oh, sure. Well, you know, I've been in this for a long time, and I think in the 20-something years that I've been, you know, working with food allergic patients, we've come a long way, long way. But there is, you know, a lot to go. And I have to tell you that we've come a long way thanks to the advocacy, the perseverance, the generosity of our patients and their families. And, you know, the two of you and who you represent, you're the ones that put food allergy on the map, because it is a disease of children, and children needed to be listened and mothers need to be listened. We have learned about genetics and the microbiome, and we have gotten other stakeholders that are interested, the healthcare organizations, industry. It's a joy, it's a challenge. These are still challenging by exciting times. A lot of research is coming along. We need, you know, the community to keep on coming together, to persevere, and to keep on making noise and support, because I can see it. We're close to getting enough answers that this will become a manageable condition with the possibility of a cure.
Thank you. Dr. Katru, you're next.
I think Maria hit it all on a nail. I agree that we've seen it completely shift from 20 years ago, where avoidance was our only option. And now we have so many other, not only management options, but therapeutic options. We have so much more knowledge on prevention, not just in utero, but after postpartum as well. So I think we've come a long way, but I agree with Dr. Garcia-Lloret. We have a long way to go. And I think really the support of the families make a huge difference. It's those voices that are pushing and propelling the research and getting more people interested, not just in the medical field, but in the engineering field, in the IT field. And, you know, there's the sky's the limit where we can go with this. And it excites me that food allergy is finally getting the respect that it's deserved all these years. And I think more and more people are now paying attention. So Jessica, as you mentioned, you're not alone, or Kara, you've had this for years, you're not alone. And really having this community, I think, is crucial, because in that realm of community, we're going to keep pushing it forward. So thank you guys for your help.
Thank you, Dr. Butte. Let's end with you.
Okay, I'm going to put up a slide because that's what academics do. And I'm going to riff on what Rita just said, which is about community. We, a couple of years ago when I got here, we started thinking about how to build a community around food allergy and what are our real needs to build a program that comprehensively can do the research, do the clinical care, make the changes in the way we think and act and work around food allergy, so that at some point, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whenever it is, we can say we're working on the cure. And this slide really it's a lot to cover, and I'm not going to cover it all in a minute, but to show you how we're thinking about food allergy as being part of a large community that plugs into parts of UCLA. For example, space and clinical needs. We have been able to achieve some of these things. We are now taking care of well over 150 patients with oral immunotherapy here, because we identified a few years ago that this was a major area of growth for us all. And then there are other areas that we're still trying to build here. We see translational and basic research needs in food allergy, and we're looking for funding to try to hire people to grow the program in food allergy genetics, to grow a program in food allergy microbiome, et cetera, as you can see here. And of course, education and training are a critical part of food allergy. We know that that as we can educate people about appropriate maneuvers, like early introduction of foods, that we can actually start to hopefully see a reduction in food allergy. But the only way to get that education out there into the community outreach is that we have to launch programs here, to get into the schools, to get into webinars like this, to get the word out to the 10 million people who live in our county and the 40 million people who live in our state. How can we get this knowledge that we're just learning about food allergy quickly into people's hands so they can make a difference? And that, I think that's really the only way that we're going to, in the next few years, be able to say, hey, we're now actually seeing, hopefully, a decline in food allergy. I have to say right now, we're not, right? We still are seeing a rise in food allergy. The statistics have shown that the food allergies have gone up between 5 and 10-fold every decade since the three of us were in our clinical training. So we're not really, we haven't made a change in turning the tide yet. But the things you saw today, I think, will help us do that. We just have to build that community, again, that Dr. Katru just said, to try to work together so we can solve this problem.
Okay, thank you so much to our panelists and everyone in our community who joined us today. And thank you for submitting your questions. I'm sorry we did not get to all of them. We encourage everyone to tune in to the remainder of our series with our next event on November 9th. And this will be about food allergy in elementary school age children. And if you're interested in learning more about the UCLA food allergy program, or would like to make an appointment with an allergist, if you want to learn about clinical trials or about supporting research at UCLA, please see the chat box. There will be some websites for you to visit listed in there.
And everyone who registered today will receive an email with a video link from today's event, along with a survey, which we encourage you all to complete. On behalf of the UCLA Food Allergy Parent Committee, thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you again soon.